I am Geoff Eido. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. How? Nice. That's good. Your wolf has a cold.
So I'm a wolf. All right.
Yeah, you're a wolf. You didn't. That wasn't obvious by the
I didn't know
howling.
if it was a coyote or a wolf.
Okay, all right, that's fair. You could have gone coyote. Yeah, that's true. Lunacy is a luminary podcast. My luminary guest today is my dear friend Owen Marcus. Owen is a leader in men's work and therapy and all kinds of different modalities that have made him a Jedi. He's also known as OwenWan Kenarcus on Tatooine, if you're familiar. He is a Jedi, and I really mean that. I really mean that in a real way. He's somebody who is incredibly proficient at identifying, what needs to move and pointing it out in a very succinct, effective manner, having experienced that myself through his work. So I'm really excited to welcome you to the program. Thanks for being here, Owen.
Jeff, it's an honor to be here. I think that's all we need to do. I'm ready to leave.
Yeah, we're done.
Right.
And that's it, people. Do fucking men's work. You know what I mean? Go for it. Yeah. So I want to start a little bit with a little bit of your background, like what got you to this point now in your history. Just kind of a brief overview of the work.
Where I'm at now is someplace I never thought I would be. I mean, if you said 30 years ago I'd be doing this, I said no way in hell. Mm-hmm. Short story. I mean, I got into all this work 50 years ago. I was living in Boulder. I had a roommate who had given up his law practice to learn this stuff. He convinced me to give it a try. I resisted. He was a good litigator. He argued his case real well. I said, all right, what the hell? I'll give it a try. And spent 4 years in Boulder. It was sort of like graduate school, learning all this somatic psychotherapy and rolfing and all the stuff that Boulder had to offer. Moved down to Phoenix in 1980. Ended up starting a practice. It became an integrated medical clinic. We did a lot with that. And then in the 90s, early to mid 90s, I was in this relationship. And one night in particular, Pamela was her name. She's sitting on this couch and she's saying, "Owen, I don't feel you." And what was real interesting was I wasn't arguing, but I was like debating. I was giving her all these reasons why she should feel me. Mm-hmm. And she was very patient and she was saying, "Owen, I don't feel you." After a few minutes, I finally got smart enough and realized, well, shit, what I'm saying is not emotional. It might be analytical, it might be cognitive, it might even be right, but it's not emotional, and there's nothing for her to connect to. I got that, but what I didn't get was how to shift that. And then I had a thought, well, maybe I should join a men's group, or if not join one, start one. I don't want to do that. That's weird. So it's the last thing I want to do. I go, well, I've learned enough by that point to usually see that, if I have a resistance, there's often something there. Called up a friend that I had in DC. He recommended something, pursued that. And it was like mid-90s. I started getting into men's work and I started a group out of my clinic. It was a mediocre group, but it was enough to show me that there was something there. Mm-hmm. In the course of doing all that, I learned how to connect to myself. I learned how to connect to women and really other people. And a lot of that was something I never would have thought, was just putting a group of guys together in an emotionally safe space, particularly if you train them a little, minimally, around how to get connected to themselves. Pretty quickly, they start teaching each other how to do that. So, mm-hmm. In starting and leading these groups, I really learned how to connect to people through connecting through men.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. That's amazing. And so you've been doing that ever since?
Ever since.
And you also do some couples work and all kinds of stuff,
and coaching. And so I was in Phoenix, and then I moved to Northern California for a year, helped start a really good group in Sonoma and Napa County, moved to North Idaho, did a few groups. Then 21 years ago, I said, all right, this traditional model of men's work is not bad, but it just doesn't work for me. And I think there's more that we can do. I said, all right, I'm going to apply everything I learned, starting in Boulder and through my clinical practice, towards a men's group. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even thinking men's work, just men's group. I'm going to ask 11 guys. So we have a group of 12 guys. I asked 11 guys. They all said yes. I went, oh, wow, I got to show up. So, I had this new house and we started meeting every Wednesday night for 4 hours, which is long for a men's group. And that men's group, 21 years later, it's had over 500 guys in it. Currently over 60 guys in 6 groups. And I'm in a Zoom group for some of the expats.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a huge win. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah. If someone said you'd be doing this for 20 years, I'd say no. And then it evolved into 3 different businesses, which I certainly wouldn't have expected. But what it showed me was that men not only want this, but they're ready for it. And the readiness has really grown every year. Men's work, when I got into it, was pretty fringe. Now men's work and men's groups is something that guys are looking for.
Yeah, that's true. We're kind of waking up to this. That's something that we need. Yeah, that's also, we can just dive into the for me anyway, I'm really passionate about wanting to change our education system. I feel like it's time for us to wake up and really like cultivate the skills that every human being really needs in order to live a good life and get through all the bullshit that we have to deal with and the distractions and the traumas that we're inevitably going to have to face. You can't get through this life unscathed. That's not a thing. And, part of me really wants there to be like a processing class and, time was that when we were in tribal days, obviously men were getting together in groups, just the men, to talk about men things, and also like to educate the young boys and to how to deal with their emotions and deal with focusing and also deal with women and respect them, hopefully. And, that's something I feel like is sorely needed, particularly now. That's something that you are really working on. And I'm curious, if you had to develop a curriculum for kids or for students to learn, what would that class look like? What would be on the curriculum?
Well, one of the businesses that I had when I was in Phoenix was we started a mindfulness training company. And I don't know, are you familiar with John Kabat-Zinn? He really is the guy that put mindfulness on the map. So he was an anatomy professor at UMass Amherst, teaching in the med school. And all the docs started sending him all the people they couldn't help because he did these weird things like, meditation and martial arts. So being the scientist that he was, he put a program together, researched it, wrote a book on it, and they started teaching this course. And my partner and I in this business took his professional training. I think it was the second one he ever did. We were the first company to ever really make it a business. So we did that in Phoenix. And then my partner went on to sort of do it in schools, because I think getting kids to be able to downregulate, relax, get connected to their own experience, particularly the somatic experience, which, as you can imagine, kids do it a lot easier than us adults, is the foundation. And now, after all these years, they have all this research, not only on adults, but on how effective that is for kids. So that sort of is like the foundation. Get them present, get them connected to themselves. And then, as you said, teach them these skills. And you don't have to teach them all the didactical stuff, but really how to, once you're present with yourself, how to relate to others and allow them an opportunity to screw up, because I screwed up a lot as a kid. And I think there's a lot to be said for having made your mistakes when you're young. And you do that through interacting with people and giving them an opportunity to do that, and not cloistering or protecting these kids so much that they're not doing it. And then, the other thing is limit their virtual interactions.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing that schools that don't allow phones, the kids are performing better. That's easy to measure academically, but I think they're performing better emotionally too, because they have to relate, as we did growing up, one-to-one, and not through the texting each other.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We have no idea what that's going to yield, but it doesn't look good. I mean, it's already not looking good. I often think about how, I went back to New Orleans not too long ago to visit a bunch of friends and from college, and we went to the bar that we always used to go to in college, because that's what we did. And a bunch of kids came in, and they sat at this table, and there was like 8 of them, and they sat around the table, and every single one of them was just staring at their phone. And it was so weird. I was like, how do you guys, like, what's the point of even coming if you're just going to be on your phone? Like, it's a different age. And then that also inhibits and short circuits our ability to socialize with other people,
Well, and then we expand that into relationships. Yeah, you have hookups, but you don't have relationships. And so, you know, I struggled with relationships as every, young man did in high school. But in hindsight, I saw that set me up for some success later in life. And without that struggle learning, through experience, I wouldn't be able to have a relationship to the level that I have it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So your curriculum looks like get them into their body, teach them how to meditate, and get them to somatic. I think everybody watching this podcast understands that somatic means in the body, like moving things in the body, moving energy in the body. What else would you encourage them to do?
Play.
Okay.
Play. Waldorf Snyder and the Waldorf schools. I mean, what's not Waldorf Snyder? It's Snyder.
Yeah.
And it's Waldorf schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think they have something figured out. And they teach, because we had a lot of guys in our group that were Waldorf teachers. And so they teach these kids how to play, literally play music and produce their own plays. But they realize that, we learn better when we're having fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in this society, we think a lot of learning is didactical learning. And now what we're seeing is much of that can be done with AI. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole big pushback of that, in colleges now, because it's like these kids understandably are saying, why do I invest so much in this education when AI can do all that?
Right.
And so I think, learning how to play, how to interact, how to be creative, all these things are more experiential. Mm-hmm. They're not didactical. And we need, kids need places to do that. And that's much more natural, organic. And so you might not in school being able to cite some of the things that you could cite if you had a traditional education, which was really set up for the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And if you were able to just learn in a more organic way, more relational way, learn, now, they're saying in business, the most important skill is going to be emotional intelligence, because all these other skills are going to be handled with technology. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're doing our kids and probably a few other generations a really disservice by not allowing them to learn this way. And again, it starts in the elementary school and at that grade level where they're learning to think on their own and interact on their own and certainly have guardrails, but have these experiences. Because my whole belief is that the biggest guru we have in our life is experience. Mm-hmm. Experience has this ability to give you feedback. And when you have a positive experience, short-term or long-term, you're going to keep repeating it. When you have a negative experience, you're going to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Or you're going to keep repeating it because you didn't process it properly.
Exactly, yeah. And there's other reasons where you're going to keep repeating it. But you're going to keep getting the negative feedback.
Right. And then that might become part of your identity, and then you're stuck in that cycle, and then that's just how it goes.
Right.
Lifetime of suffering. Hard to avoid. Particularly in this day and age, why men's work and why is it so necessary?
As you alluded to, I think it's always been necessary, and I think in more traditional cultures, it's always there. It probably wasn't called men's work. It was just men doing things with men or boys, and as women did. The women were, in a simplistic sense, were the gatherers, men were the hunters. And so men would go out on a hunting party and be together, maybe for several days. And they do the guys thing, they probably argue, maybe fight, play, all those things. And they would support each other. So I think we have an instinctual, biological, genetic need for that, number one. Two, we don't have a society that really supports it or maybe allows it. And again, I think in men's work, be it a men's group, men's trainings or whatever, we need a place where we can just be ourselves. And what immediately impressed me with these groups was that quickly every guy starts to realize they're not any more screwed up as anyone else. And I have a good friend of mine that's done all these studies on men. And then, he's writing these books on men, and he was just presenting last week, and he just unpacked it in the way that I've heard some of his stuff, but he just went a little deeper, and it was all that. It was like, as men, we think we're really screwed up. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we think we're really screwed up, because in the outer world, we never talk about how screwed up we are. So, everyone looks really good. Everyone presents well. Mm-hmm. They wear their mask well. Their CV looks good, all that. Well, what inevitably happens in at least my groups and my trainings is pretty quickly guys just drop that mask. And then it almost gets competitive in that guys see how vulnerable they can be and how real they can be, how quickly. But whatever, they start realizing that, yeah, Joe has this problem, Sam has this problem, I have my problem. But at the end of the day, we all have our imperfections. We're all working at it. And just understanding that and being able to relate to each guy at that level is a huge breakthrough for men. And it goes on from there. But just that, because we live in a world of isolation, as the studies say, and men are dying because of isolation. But when we're in that kind of experience, men get the experience that, wow, all these things I thought about myself was really not true, in the sense that I'm not the only one. We all are on that same level.
Yeah, definitely. There's a certain permission that you give yourself in that kind of a scenario, where you really are able to recognize yourself in others and other men and see similar experiences. And then also you allow yourself to actually feel the feelings that you have not been allowing yourself to feel. You've just been stuffing down your whole life. There's something really courageous and beautiful about that level of authenticity that you really can't get anywhere else. And I have no doubt, obviously, I have not been to any women's circles. You know what I mean? I tried. I've asked. They said, and I'm like, look at my fucking hair. Look at the long hair. I can make it. I can do it. I get called lady from time to time, but they don't buy it once I start talking.
Well, I have surgeries these days.
That's true. I could transition. I could. But I have no doubt. There's no doubt that those groups are equally, if not, equally important to women to be able to do that, and also of different ages. That's the thing about men's groups that I find in the men's work that I've done. It's all different ages. You get kids that are 18 to 74, or older even. And they all have their own issues. And then a lot of times the older folks are able to step into their wisdom role and recognize the experience that they've had, which then allows them through the men's work to kind of move up and step into that archetype of being a wiser man, where they just don't get that opportunity anywhere else. In the isolated work environment, you just come home and you're in a relationship with your family, and there's not community. It's so necessary, and that's also part of your work, is the importance of community. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, let me just say one more thing about what we were just saying. Is I think what we don't realize is that we learn a lot of this vicariously. So when we're young, we learn a lot of ways of how to show up emotionally or relationally through the adults, particularly our parents. So it's not like they sit us down and give us a book and this is how you behave. We watch it. And so we watch a lot of the dysfunction.
Yes.
Either we emulate it, or we say, we're no way in hell am I going to do that. And we go the other way, which often is equally as bad as what our parents did.
Right.
And so what's beautiful about the groups and these trainings is guys learn these skills through other guys.
That's right.
And I didn't really realize how powerful that was until I started seeing that. And guys would just sit there and I think they're not doing anything or they're not getting anything. And then they say, or I see through their behaviors, just being a witness maybe for several weeks in a group they just joined, they're getting all this information. And it's not just cognitive, it's really experiential, because they're reacting. And they're rewiring their nervous system and their thinking and their behaviors and their emotions just from observing these men behave in a way that they never have seen a man behave. It's like, how does a man feel and express his vulnerability? And we've been trained to do it more or less like a woman does it.
Right.
And it's not, I'm going to say this is not a conspiracy theory. It's, my view is that, once the Industrial Revolution happened, men had to go to work.
They had to go to the factory.
Yeah, that was 40, 80 hours or whatever, they were gone. And it's more or less done that. Women had to step up, and the teachers were women. And so over these couple hundred years, emotionality in this culture is sort of skewed towards the feminine, and that's a natural thing. And so men haven't had the opportunity, or the boys haven't had an opportunity to observe men being emotional. And so, we take what we get. And so when these guys, and you've probably seen this, see men being emotional in a way that a man's being emotional, it's like, wow, I've never seen it. Wow, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, I could do that. That doesn't feel feminine or weak or whatever. That just feels like I'm being a man.
Yeah.
And these guys, I respect that guy for, being vulnerable, maybe crying. I honor him. And wow, that's a whole state shift for a guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that you pointed out very well. I mean, the women, at least up until now women are working, and we're in this weird, everybody's working. I don't know what the fuck is going on. We've maybe lost our way a little bit, but for so long, certainly my generation coming up, my mother, she also worked and she was a teacher, but she fundamentally was raising us. And so then I had her as my influence, and my dad showed zero emotion and was like, kind of absentee. I love you, Dad. You made up for it later and we totally worked it out. But when I look to my formative years, that was the example that I had. Dad's gone and there's Mom, and she's at my games, not my dad, because he's working, and God bless him. He worked hard and did great, and was an excellent provider. There's no shade on Papa. Love you, Dad. I know you were doing your best, but also like the influence is from the feminine, and for me that sort of worked out in a I think either just my natural proclivity is to be more emotional as a person. I'm sensitive. I'm an actor. Whatever I sing, like that. Or she did a lot right, my mom. But from the male example, it's stuff it down. Don't talk about it. Don't express your emotions. If you feel bad, don't show it. Put the mask up, and that's it. Shut up and bear it. And so for me, I'm very pro crying. I think it's incredibly important for men to cry, for everybody to cry, because then you can actually release the emotion, not to like indulge in it and continue to just be depressed and wallow like that. Although sometimes that's actually necessary, but to really like allow yourself to fully feel the emotion and then release it. Particularly if it's something like related to death and dying. My one of my best friend's father just passed away. When I found out, I immediately started crying because I love that man and I love my friend, and I know how much of an influence he had on him. Then that allows me to honor him and meet him in a way, and meet my experience in a way that does honor to him. Miss you, Barry. Oh no, I start fucking crying. There you go. So I think it's really important for us to talk about and allow men the experience of crying, the experience of being vulnerable and authentic, and that's something that's sorely missing. Not to say you go to men's work in order to cry, but it's like a natural thing that you witness people do. People finally allow themselves to experience that as a man would, not as a woman would, which is really, it's distinct. We're both all crying, but there's a different air about it, and in that kind of authentic environment, it's really cleansing and good,
and as you said, necessary. And I think we do men and maybe men's work a disservice when we tell men that they need to get in touch with their feminine side.
Right.
Now, I understand a Jungian model, and and I think Jung was a brilliant man, and so I get it from that level. But at least in this culture, when you tell a man that he needs to be more feminine, most men are going to try to find his first door out of the room.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think in some ways for good reason, where, one of my things is to say what you're pretty much saying is that we have a whole repertoire of emotions that, on a whole is probably more similar than dissimilar from women, but there is a difference. And, to your point, we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
And so we don't know that until we're in one of these environments where guys just become authentic, which part of being authentic is vulnerable. But part of vulnerability is not just crying, it's opening up and caring about someone else.
Yeah.
And it's, giving and receiving honor. And some of the hardest work that I and probably most men do is receiving. I mean, you think crying might be hard, but sometimes just having a guy just really honor you can be hard.
Yeah.
So we see that full spectrum in a group. And again, in men, might come in and just observe it at first, and then they, it just starts opening up possibilities, and then they start leaning in. And this is the other thing, we can do therapy, we can read books, all for all that. Done therapy, trained therapists, written books, read books, all that. I think there's a place for all that. But again, we need the experience. Mm-hmm. And so you might understand your emotions and your relationship, but until you can get to experience and practice some of these skills, and that's the big part. And we need a safe place to practice this. And so what I would see in these groups is guys who get to practice these skills and practice relating. And we'll say like 6 months later, that practice would just generalize into the relationship. So when I lived in this small town in North Idaho, women would come up to me and say, Owen, I want to thank you for what you did for Joe or Henry. He's a different man because you're a group. He's a guy I fell in love with now. I don't know what you do in your group, but keep it up. And I go, great. I mean, it's like, that's one of the biggest compliments that I or the group could get. And it was just that, again, the guy saw it, he learned it experientially, he embodied it, he practiced it. And once you get it at that level, you're going to practice it throughout your whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's something for sure that's incredibly magical about that and transformative. The permission granted to actually experience your emotions and communicate them it's a huge missing. And it also allows you to be present, because if you don't express those emotions, I know from my own experience, you're just stuck in the past. You're stuck in this fucking thing that happened a long time ago or whatever it was. And you can't release it because you're unwilling to say it, because you don't feel like you have permission to communicate it to other people or other men. And so allowing that to happen is an incredibly beneficial way to actually be present and powerful.
And I didn't, and I think this might be true for you, and I know it has been true for other guys. We don't know what we're missing. I remember a few years ago I was doing a training, and there's this big elite ex-Marine that teaches martial arts and had this successful business. He was all tatted up, and we do a little like check-in when we start our training, and every guy's says who they are and what they're feeling and anything else. I mean, it's 30 seconds. And we go around the room or the circle, and he's near the end, and he says, I don't like men, and don't touch me. And my trainers and I go, oh, okay. And it's the kind of guy that if he's pissed off, you don't want to even get near him.
Right.
And then
why did he come?
I know. I go, what the hell are you here?
You're in the wrong class.
Right. So, but at the end, we do a comparable like checkout, and everyone goes around and he's saying, I love you guys.
Oh, wow.
If you ever need anything, give me a call.
Wow.
And then he comes back and does the next training because he was able to show up. Mm-hmm. But, what he realized was that, he was living a life in a very small box. Mm-hmm. And that, 4 days in our training just blew that box open.
Yeah.
And so, he sensed, I think he had enough sense that he was missing something, but he didn't know what it was. He certainly didn't know how to get on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. And he had the courage to show up. And for this big, tough guy, it probably took him more courage than anyone else in that room. And, and he was pretty passive until the end. Yeah. And at the end, he's hugging everyone.
Right. Don't touch me, and I hate men. Which is interesting to me also because, in Marine Corps, it's definitely there's a lot of suppression going on in the Marine Corps, including the part of you that allows yourself to kill people and whatnot. We could talk about that. But there is definitely, and I'm not anti-Marine, God bless the Marines, but there is definitely a brotherhood that exists in the military, unlike anywhere else in our society. It's not necessarily a healthy brotherhood all the time, but you are, any man that is asked, why are you doing this? It's for the guy next to me, that's a palpable life and death sense of brotherhood that they don't then get anywhere else. And the rest of it gets suppressed, but there's a core piece there that you can just get by sitting around in a room in a circle with a bunch of dudes, where you feel, oh, wow, okay, these guys support me. They got my back. They get where I'm coming from. They understand the issues that I have, with anger, et cetera, or whatever it is.
Yeah, we did a training several years ago with it wasn't solely for this, but there was a team from the Army Special Forces. And I remember the medic in the team said, my life goal is to die for my friends or my buddies.
Yeah.
And that goes to the honor. Honor is real important for men.
Very important.
And, and they will die for that. And they will die for their brothers. And, that's a great gift.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've worked with a fair amount of vets over the years, and they are often traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. They have the type brotherhood, and they will re-up and do another tour just for that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons they sometimes come to us, is that they've had it, so they know what they're missing, and they need it. And that's what they tell me, and I believe it's true. That's one reason why 22 of them are killing themselves every day still.
Yeah.
Because they are so isolated, because they don't have that. And now, we don't have a war, thank God, or at least one where we have troops on the ground. And so there's no opportunity for them to re-enlist, or they're too old or whatever, but they need that. And one of the questions we get is, should we segment the men's work, like for the vets, for a certain race or whatever? And my feeling and experience is no. You're limiting it, because my experience is you have the full spectrum of men, ages, professions, histories, traumas, all that. And pretty quickly, everyone in the room realizes they're just men.
Yeah.
And it ends up being more healing. And so like with these vets, they quickly realize having regular guys there was actually more empowering, more integrative than just being with vets.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's another outlet to discover brotherhood that's outside of the military.
Exactly.
And you don't have to have bullets whizzing by your head in order to experience the love that you have for your fellow man, They
did a documentary film on our group many years ago. And after like 5 weeks of them shooting, we did a wrap party, and there was a guy there that was handling the sound, and he didn't say much. I mean, they were just filming. And so I went over and talked to him. And I wanted to thank him for doing that. And I asked him, what's your background? What brought you here? Well, he was Navy corpsman, which immediately I knew what that meant. And then he started telling me, about.
What does that mean for people who don't know?
Oh, a corpsman is a medic in the Navy. So that meant that he served with the Marines.
Right. Okay. Right.
So he was a medic for the Marines.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, I get chills just thinking about this. They're not there really so much to kill. I mean, they will and be trained, but they're really there to take care of their men. And so, in the heat of battle, he was running around saving lives and getting shot at and losing lives.
Yeah. And
then he was like, by the default, the therapist and everything else. So he was putting out and doing all that, which was great, which is why he wanted to be a corpsman, but there was no support for him. Because he had to, be on for everyone else. And so he got out, and he was traumatized, as you can imagine. What he told me that night at the wrap party was he was there the first night we filmed. And my old friend Wayne and I were having a little bit of a truffle because, I thought I was leading the meeting. He thought he was. I said, look, I don't really care. But I said, Wayne, we're filming this and you're arguing. You're not going to look good on the movie.
Yeah, right.
But whatever. And so I had, the group said, let Owen lead. He's leading. And, but whatever happened that evening, this fellow went home, drove his car into the garage, and sobbed for half an hour.
Wow.
The first time he was able to cry in years. And then he said the next day, he could walk in this small, really safe town without needing or feeling he needed someone watching his back. Just watching us do the work released something for him, and that release allowed him to walk in our little town feeling safe for the first time in years. And he did everything he could with the Navy, with the VA, and it didn't help. And then he had a hip problem. He did everything with the Navy and the VA. And he said, went to the best physical therapist. I said, look, I'm a rolfer. I'll give you a free session. Gave him a free session. It was, part of the trauma. Never had a hip problem afterwards. Because that trauma gets locked in our soft tissue.
Yeah.
And once he had that emotional release, it wasn't hard to get the physical release. And then, because he was a fairly young, healthy guy, And it was just where his trauma went.
Yeah.
I mean, I had many years earlier, I had a officer from Special Forces that served in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
who actually was behind enemy lines. And he had a hip problem, a leg problem. He had a strange walk, and no one could help it. And during one of the sessions, he had this spontaneous release, which I just sat there and was, holding space.
Holding space.
Just let him have it.
Yeah.
And then, we integrated that. And next week he came back and he told me the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And the story was that they were going to ambush this village, and they got ambushed.
Okay.
And so, they had to deal with it. They're ambushed. And so he had to break a neck of a 12-year-old boy. And then he had to go do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So he never got to be able to process it. That was locked in his adductors, those muscles in the inside of his leg. And once that released, the emotion associated with it released. He walked in next week, perfect.
Huh.
It was like before, it was like the leg was in backwards.
Yeah.
Everything was straight. Once the emotional charge was released, his body realigned itself.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that we store our emotional, physical trauma in our soft tissue. Yes, some of it's in our brain, but the bulk of it, and we have a lot of it in our body, is in our soft tissue. And when that soft tissue is able to release, the emotions release, the stress and trauma release. It's in the converse is true too. And which gets us, into why we do this somatic work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's just, since we're on the subject of rolfing a little bit, because a lot of people don't understand what that is, working with the fascia layer. Just tell us a little bit about why that work is important and what it can do for people.
It was started by Dr. Rolf. She had a PhD in chemistry, and she never wanted it named after her. But short story is, she had a son no one could help. She helped him, and then she started training these docs how to do it. And then she, created this profession back in the late 60s and the early 70s. And I got into it in the mid 70s. And it's a series, usually like 10 sessions, where you're releasing the chronic stress in the body. And there's a guy that wrote the book on stress, Stress of Life, Hans Selye, he's an MD. And they called him a quack, so he had to go to Canada to practice. But one of the things he said was fascia is the organ of stress. Mm-hmm. He said it, this is well over 50 years ago. Yeah. And we store that in our fascial system. Mm-hmm. And so, what I developed was this very precise craft of releasing that chronic stress and organizing, or as she would say, aligning the body with gravity. Mm. And when done well, it's amazing. Yeah. Because you're releasing the old stress, and it could be from a lot of different situations, and you're straightening the body out. So it's like, I tell people, it's like, having like a jumpsuit that's a size too small. And so your whole body and your skeleton is crunched or twisted or distorted because you literally don't have enough room to sit or stand straight. Mm-hmm. And so we loosen that suit, and suddenly your skeleton can reorganize itself. And because it's set back to where it's meant to be, it pretty much stays there. Mm-hmm. In the course of doing that, the body releases a lot of the old stress. So when I went through it back in the mid 70s, did the 10 sessions once a week, 9 months later, I was an inch taller and just short of 20 pounds lighter.
Wow.
And I was never fat. I'm not fat now, and I wasn't then. But I had these huge, thick legs where I couldn't walk. I just waddled. And that was a lot of my old stress and trauma, ended up in my legs. And that just released. And when that released, my legs changed. They transformed. My structure aligned and literally stretched out. And my whole emotional state changed. And that was really my sort of entrance into this whole thing of somatics.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what got you into it. Yeah, I know I did some rolfing sessions, and I had like I've had a lot of injuries and so much release, including like an ankle injury that I had where I sprained my ankle during COVID, and it never really kind of got back. And after doing the rolfing, it totally released and opened up. So I definitely get how important that kind of work is. And it's sort of astonishing to me that that's not more practiced, given the results that people see, that it's not more part of our modern medical system, but it's...
Yeah, I've said that for 50 years, but unfortunately what's happened is, and this happens with a lot of institutions, the quality's gone down.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of the training, and you get these administrators that start organizing the institution around being an administrator, rather than, when I got into it, we really cared about it, and everyone was sacrificing and putting their extra effort in to really put the work out there and keep developing the work. And now I think institutionally, unfortunately, it's sort of shifted to being just an institution.
Okay. But still good if you find the right person. When you
find the right person, it's life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Let's talk about community,
There's three parts of the work that I do. One is the somatic part. One is the relational part, which gets into the attachment theory stuff. But the third part, which is the part that sort of came to me last, but it shouldn't have, was the communal part, which we sort of talked about. Was, we're meant to be in community, or tribes, and it's in our genome. And when we get men in our groups or trainings, that ancestral need and ability that shows up. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it, creates this safe space, but we get to learn and practice of these things that we talked about. And it sort of wakes up this latent desire we have. And so what I've seen with these guys over these years is that, they stay in these groups, not because they need the benefit of the groups. I mean, their lives have improved, their relationships, their careers have transformed, whatever, but they have this need to, come to the group every week because it's their community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what it is, particularly in Sandpoint, this group, that I started. It's a community of authentic guys just, getting together there for 4 hours a week, which is a long time. But it's also a community of families. Mm-hmm. And so now, when a guy has a problem, the community shows up. So it's a real community.
Yeah.
But it's a real community based on these authentic connections.
Yeah. The importance of that community and having not just, brotherhood support among men, but then also family support is really something that's so important and has been so lost. It's so interesting, even with the advent of, communications across the globe instantaneously and the internet and everything. You would think that we'd be more connected, but really, we're more isolated and more masked and more focusing on doing it for the gram and making sure that we look good for everybody else and not intimately related, as you put it. I'm reading this book called The Spirit of Intimacy by Sobonfo Some, which I probably didn't pronounce properly, but it's this incredibly brilliant book about her experience living in the Dagara African villages and their system and the way that they do things, which involves a lot of ritual and involves a recognition that we're all, connected to source or spirit, however you look at that. And that, in all of our relationships, it's about the community. If somebody's sick in the community, it's not just that guy over there is sick. No, the village is sick. Mm-hmm. And we need to do something as a village in order to help this person release so that the village can thrive again. I know I did a documentary project that actually is still in the works on hunger. And we went to Malawi, Africa to cover this organization called the Hunger Project, mm-hmm. which is a really beautiful organization that's all about empowering the people themselves to end their own hunger. And, I was expecting everyone to be sad. I was like, they've got to be sad. They don't have television and shit. And I've never met happier people mm-hmm. in my own life. To this day, I've never met happier people. It's just generally happier people, smiling, just enjoying life.
Generous.
Yeah. Generous, compassionate, empathetic. Mm-hmm. People are looking out for each other because they live in that village dynamic. And it's something that, in our modern day, in our houses where we don't relate to each other, we don't see each other, there's not that same kind of community. It exists occasionally, but it's pretty rare. There's, a lot of people who live up here where we live in the Grass Valley area, people come here for community because there is a greater sense of community, even though it's not that quite that village level. But there's no question that that's something that provides so much, for people, the ability to identify what it is that your gift is, and then have the people of the community support you into giving that gift, and then having the people in the community allow you to give that. Like for me, it's music. So then I go and do music, and I'm supported by the community in whatever way, by them listening, but also by them creating space for me to do that. Also interacting with other musicians. For you, it's doing men's work and living in that world. But that's something that seems to be, I don't want to say it's like on the extinction list, because I don't think it is, but we at some point we did take kind of a left turn, and it seems very clear that for our own good and for the evolution of humanity, community is going to be incredibly important in the future.
Yeah, I think so, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it happened for a few different reasons, but our virtual connections just slipped in. And I think it slipped in one way because there was a void. So, nature abhors a void. So technology just sort of ended up there. And then we get connection, but it's like junk food connection.
Right.
Just like, when you're hungry, you might crave junk food and you feel satiated for a while, but you're not nourished.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this virtual connection, there's an upside to it. There's some healthy things about it. But there's certainly some unhealthy things. And like junk food, it might appease your immediate need, but you're never nourished on that level.
That's right.
And you just get hungrier and hungrier and more depleted.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes an obsession for some people. But we're really on a deeper level looking for that deeper connection. And as you said, with these indigenous communities, it's baked in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one reason they're happy. And another reason it's happy is they don't have all the stress or distractions that we think are necessary and positive, but end up,
in our civilized world,
end up paying a price that we don't even realize.
Yeah, a huge price. Yeah.
And when I was up in Sandpoint, the small community in North Idaho, so I started this group, and then I wanted to expand it to our partners and a bigger community. So we did community things, but I'm a pipe carrier out of a couple different lineages, which means that. In the Native American tradition, I've been initiated, and with that initiation, I was taught how to lead sweat lodges. Mm-hmm. So we had a lodge on my property that we'd do regularly, usually at the solstice and the equinox, and we'd open it up to the community. So it'd be men, their partners, and other people that we wanted to invite, and that really became a sort of a catalyst for this micro community of our group sort of emerging into a bigger community. And what I saw, and now I keep hearing, because I haven't lived there for a few years, is that what we established in this community when I was there was about 8,000 people. I know it's grown since. Was it just affected the whole community? Because I had people that weren't a part of the group telling me about how the group had impacted them indirectly or the community. Mm-hmm. And I think in part because it goes to what you're saying, Geoff, is that people want something that's more authentic. Mm-hmm. And they don't even know they're missing it, but they want something and they don't know how to get it. And they don't know where to get it. And the last set of people they think about delivering it would be men.
Right.
And these men are delivering it, and they're showing up in their homes and in the community in a way that they never would have shown up before, mm-hmm. that is more fulfilling for them and really for the whole community. And it starts to, in our modern community, create what you're talking about, they had in this African tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's fascinating. There's also, you mentioned, people, are eating, but not getting nourished, which reminds me of the whole hungry ghost mm-hmm. theory, which is kind of a Buddhist thing. The idea that there are these spirits or energies within us that are just like Slimer, from Ghostbusters. They just keep eating, but the food doesn't actually do anything. It just drops on the floor. There's no actual nourishment that we're getting, but we have this insatiable hunger that we can't stop because we're not fully getting nourished by our experiences. And that happens with things like internet porn and, just whatever, video games, and the whole mask, mask focused culture that we have that's just kind of happened. And that's like a real problem, that people aren't really feeling the sense of community and connection and vulnerability and authenticity that, we had experienced in tribal days and other days. That's just seems like something that's sorely missing.
And I think the interface between the tribal community and modern society was a lot of institutions. Church was a big one, and then we had fraternal organizations, and all of them have sort of gone by the wayside. But what I've been reading and hearing is for the Gen Zers, a lot of them getting back into church.
Yeah.
And I think my sense, and I've heard it from a few, is because of the community. They want the community, and they want a structure, institution that can hold that. And they're going, there must be more to life than just this material or virtual world.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about leadership and patriarchy for a minute, because people say that we live in a patriarchy. That's really not true. We really live in a poorarchy. We really live in a society ruled by boys. If we lived in an actual patriarchy, it wouldn't really be a patriarchy. It would mean women would have a seat at the table, because there's respect for the feminine, for women as, fully formed, amazing individuals that are also crash landed on this planet to do whatever it is that we're here to do that we don't fully understand. And I get upset about it, because, there's a lot of shade on the patriarchy. Well, really, it should be that there's shade on men being initiated, and that men actually go through the process of initiation and doing work in order to mature themselves, in order to recognize the value of the feminine within themselves, but also the value of the feminine from which we all came, because none of us got here out of a man, we all came through a woman. So, and I'd love to talk to you about it, because to me, when I think about that, there's even more, especially as we witness systems collapse, and as we witness the extractive model failing, and the earth doing what the earth is doing, as a result of our intervention in the way that we've been doing business. It just seems incredibly critical for men, particularly in leadership positions, to be fully connected and to be connected to themselves. And I'd just like to speak about that and see kind of what your thoughts are and what we could do. Come on, Jedi, let's go. Fucking, you know what you need to do? We're going to storm the White House, all right?
Others have tried.
What?
Others have recently tried, and then
that's true.
They usually get shot.
Not storm. We're just going to walk in. You know what I mean? We're going to have a meeting. We're going to cook dinner. Okay, it's going to be fun.
We got to watch that. We could get arrested for just saying that.
Yeah, right.
I had one of my indigenous teachers said to me many years ago that if you heal the battle between the sexes, you've healed all battles, or prevented all battles. And I think there's a lot of truth to it.
Yeah.
And I also think that what the powers that be, you can make it the dark side, or however you want to frame it. The way you take people out is you divide and conquer them.
Right.
And what's the ultimate divide? The male-female divide. And then we got racial divides, we got religious divides. So you just keep separating people. And then you say, well, you saw this is what they did in the South, with the blacks and the whites, that story where they told the poor whites that your problem is not that we're not giving you enough money. It's the blacks are taking your jobs.
Right.
And so you just set that kind of dichotomy up, and then the polarity starts fighting each other. So I think a lot of powers, maybe unbeknownst to them, have sort of perpetuated this divide between the masculine and the feminine, and that there should be some tension. That there needs to be, and there naturally is a healthy tension. There's a polarity. We want that, but there's a lot of tension there that is not necessary, not healthy, and not really organically created. It was being created by the society and the situations that we live in. And we love to blame other people.
Yeah, we love it.
And others, give us all these reasons why the Republicans are bad, the Democrats are bad, or whatever.
Right.
And
more polarity. Yeah,
more polarity and more divide and more opposition and maybe more hatred, where I think as you were at least inferring, as we connect more to ourselves, downregulate, start to be maybe more vulnerable or authentic, start to have more authentic relationships, a lot of these divides just sort of dissolve away.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've seen over these years of working with men that their relationship to the feminine or women shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's organic, it's natural because they shifted and they shifted with themselves and they shifted with men.
Yeah.
And as you were also inferring, they see other men having or working towards healthy relationships with women on a one-to-one basis, but also on a theoretical basis.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going, wow, I never saw that. No one ever said that. Oh, yeah, I guess that would work. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they start practicing. They see benefits. So again, it's hard to make a shift if you've never seen anyone else on the other side of that shift.
Yeah.
And so in these men's groups and trainings, pretty quickly, men get to see other men on the other side of this sort of polarity, competition, divide and go, no, you don't need to fight that. Now, you know about Richard Reeves?
No.
So Richard Reeves was a Brookings fellow, English dude, and he wrote a book a few years ago. We had him on our program right after he wrote the book called Boys and Men. It was a whole thesis on boys and men and how we need to change our perspective. And one of the interesting things he said was the conservatives want to take everything back to the 50s where guys were in charge and that would fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the liberals want to not give boys or men anything because anything you give to a boy or a man, you're taking it away from a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think all that's starting to change.
Right.
And so a few years ago, he was funded by Melinda Gates to create his own foundation. So he has his own foundation and he's doing research and is very articulate and he, comes out and talks about all these aspects. But, as he says, and I'm seeing too, that these hard angles or edges are starting to dissolve away. For example, I mean, more and more women are realizing that, maybe I should support boys and men because I have boys. My husband's a man. My brother, my father. If they're doing well, I'm going to do well. Mm-hmm. And I love these people, and I want them to do well. And so maybe they've been getting the short end of the stick for a while. Mm-hmm. And if we give them something, it doesn't necessarily take away from us. And I'm really seeing that happen. That women are really becoming more and more supportive of our work, and women are our biggest referral source, mm-hmm. second to therapists. So women are sending men because women will say anything from like, honey, I found this thing, I think you'd really benefit, to like, either you get your shit together or I'm gone.
Yeah.
And, maybe you want to check this out.
Yeah. Or see you later.
Right.
Alligator. Yeah. That's great. Let's talk anger control. Because that's one of the big things that you deal with in your work in men's group, and I think outside of men's work as well, or just in your general, thing mm-hmm. that you do. It's something that I know I have struggled with in my life. My example, my dad would go into fits of rage and just like shake, and it would just terrify all of us, even though he never was physical with it, even though my grandfather was. So then he got that from him, and there was alcohol related to kind of all of that in different ways. Not that my dad was, always drinking. That wasn't the case, but it didn't help when he was, and that was part of my model. And it doesn't come out very often, but it can come out, particularly when it is that I feel cornered. And then it comes out in my relationship. And I've gotten way, way better about identifying early warning signs, identifying when it is that's a potential thing, identifying the argument itself as the enemy versus my wife as the enemy, having like we say, we're headed into the matrix, mm-hmm. Then that's okay, all hands on deck. We need to separate, I'm going to go take a walk. You do your thing. And then we'll come back when we've had a chance to process like what's really going on, what's really underneath, and what the feelings are for me that are causing me to feel so threatened and causing me to feel this anger. And By the way, I'm not abusive to my wife or anything. It's just a little scary. There's some semblance of what I experienced with my father that comes out in me that I've been really working on moving through, and I successfully, it's been happening. So that's great. But that's something that you deal with a lot with men. Can you kind of break that down for me and like maybe give men who are listening who have that issue, an access point to really like breaking through?
Well, start with, I think anger gets a bad rep.
Uh-huh.
And in some ways it deserves it. That said, we have, like, I call it my primary emotions, fear, anger, and grief. And then we have shame and then joy, and it sort of goes on from there. But we need anger. We know we need fear. We can all agree that, if you're afraid, that gets you out of a dangerous situation. If you didn't have fear, you probably wouldn't be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about what anger does for us.
Mm-hmm.
And anger allows us to be safe. So if I'm going to violate you in some way, you should get angry.
Right.
Or if I'm going to take something from you that's yours, that you need or whatever, you should get angry.
Mm-hmm.
So we can understand, okay, there's a place for anger. And then you could say, maybe it's a different version of anger, but assertiveness of fighting for something that's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Outrage
or fight, going in and fighting a fire and going in and, pulling someone out of that fire or whatever, which, it could be in some ways motivated by something that's sort of like anger. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I think, even though they say the only emotion that men express is anger, and I can talk about what that is, but that's really a function of, for both men and women, is that as kids, we couldn't assert ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can't assert ourselves, we get angry, and that's natural and appropriate. If you're thirsty and I take your glass from you, your first thing is maybe not to get angry, but to say, look, that's mine. I want that. You're asserting your needs.
Mm-hmm.
Very valid.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I throw it on you, you're going to get angry. Very
Mm-hmm.
valid.
Mm-hmm.
But we couldn't do that as a kid, or if we did, we got in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, one, that anger, the energy, the emotion gets stored in our body. Two, like you said, we learn ways to deal with it or not deal with it through our childhood and the parents and then the adults and the container that was contained. It was tight. It didn't allow for full experience or expression. So we learned to contain that.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is something irritates us. Some little thing, a stimuli, comes and irritates us, but we're tired or we're stressed, and that little stimuli feels like someone just punched us.
Mm-hmm.
And our brain, our cognitive part of our brain that understands everything, our executive function, might even know, like, right, that was just a little tap, but you find yourself, taking a punch.
Mm-hmm.
And that anger, as you would call it, takes over.
Yeah.
But I call that reactionary anger and not the pure anger.
Mm-hmm.
Because that pure anger, in its innocence as a kid, never got a chance to be felt, let alone expressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sort of comes out sideways. And so we understand that, but part of, as you are doing, resolving that is feeling it and getting our voice earlier on in the conversation.
Yeah.
And realizing that voice has not just power, but validity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being able to speak it. It's not that you necessarily get what you want.
Yeah.
But you get to speak it. Hopefully it's heard, or received in some way. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Again, you don't get what you want. But as a kid, we didn't get to speak. And if we did, we were often punished. Rarely were we ever acknowledged or, having a need that we wanted to assert, or we had anger about. And so it starts to unpack that. And a lot of that gets stored in our bodies, and in particular places in our bodies tend to store it more than others. And the other thing that I've done over the years is, many years ago when I was working with one of these Native Americans, is that we created this 3-day anger ceremony where you pick one person and you go out in nature and you just let it rip. I mean, I'm giving you the essence of it for 3 consecutive days where you just let your anger go about this one person you're angry about with no repercussions. No one's watching you. Nature doesn't care. You're just letting it out. And I knew it would work, but I've given that to probably hundreds of guys over a few decades. And for some of these guys, it was literally life-changing because it just sort of cracked that straitjacket. They ripped it off, and they went, wow, I got angry. I could get angry. No one died. And it was such a great release. And what it does is it also opens up these neural pathways, because it's like we have all these hardwired pathways for these different emotions. And in this case with anger, it gets shut down. So the hardwiring's there, but the software to run that hardware has been sort of turned off. And doing one of these anger ceremonies where you can just vent, be the victim, and do all or say all these inappropriate things that you couldn't as a kid, opens that up. And it might come out for a few days. So I tell guys to warn your partners. There might be some collateral effects, but once it comes out, you're just more present. Sort of like the guy was saying, that Marine. I mean, he didn't get angry in the training, but just seeing that men could express themselves opened them up. So seeing and feeling how you could express yourself opened yourself up, because one of the other things with anger is it's like, we don't want to be angry. We're told we shouldn't be angry. It's not appropriate to be angry, but we have this urge to be angry. And then we have this other urge that sort of say, no, you can't do it. And so we create this sort of asymmetric tension in us where we got one part of us that wants to express and another part that holds it back. And so we just get tighter and tighter and tighter because of this kind of polarity, where if you have an opportunity, maybe through body work or anger ceremony, or just having a witness like in a men's group where you getting angry and not being shamed and not being told to shut up, but just getting angry. Because one quick little story, many years ago, we had, like, at that point, 3 groups, and every couple months we bring these groups in. And so one time we had like over 30 guys in this one room, and I said, all right, we're going to go around the room. I want every guy to talk about how much substance do they use every week. And I was surprised at how honest these guys were, how much they got high, how much they drunk. And then there was this guy literally sitting on the other side of the room, and I've been tracking him for a while, because he was having problems with his kids and his ex-wife, who was very alcoholic. And so he told me how many, he told the group how many beers he had. So we're going through the whole circle. And then a little later, I'll call him Joe. I say, like, Joe, you love your beer more than you love your kids. And I knew that would get him angry. He jumps up, and he's a big guy, and I'm not a big guy. He runs to the middle. I walk to the middle of the circle, and I'm like this close, and he's screaming at me. And the guys that knew me weren't scared, but the new guys in the group go, he's going to kill Owen. And the other guy said, no, don't worry. Owen has it. And so like a couple of minutes, he's screaming, he's spitting. I mean, he's getting angry for the first time in life, because he grew up in this very religious environment where, you couldn't have anger, you couldn't have any emotions. And so it was exploding. And suddenly he's sobbing and his arms are around me and says, Owen, I love you. And after that, he stopped drinking, or essentially started drinking. He changed his whole relationship with his kids, and he set boundaries with his wife, ex-wife. So she wasn't, her drinking was not impacting the kids any longer. But it did not happen until he got angry. And he got angry because he had a safe place to get angry.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I do. I get angry for like good reasons a lot. It's just when it comes out sideways, like you were pointing to earlier, that I get really annoyed with it. And I think also like that's, underneath the anger is love. And also a lot of times underneath the anger are all these other emotions, like you're pointing out here with this story. It's like, well, underneath this guy getting really pissed off, there was all this love that he had for his kids, and also recognizing that he probably wasn't living up to the man that he really wanted to be for them. And so therefore he was able to release it a lot, which again just comes back to having the permission to experience the emotions that we have when we have them, and just let them pass instead of holding on to them and trying to stifle them.
And with that, what happens, that you've probably seen, is when we have a backlog of emotion, any of those emotions, and we start to express it, what we don't realize is a lot of that energy or charge, particularly when it is or feels disproportional, is really not about that particular situation.
No.
It might be 5% about that and 95% about all the other times, in this case with anger, that you couldn't get angry.
Yeah.
But the same thing happens with grief.
Mm-hmm.
When you haven't felt your grief, your sadness, and you have a breakup or a loss and it's overwhelming, but you let yourself feel it, it starts to drain that swamp.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about draining it all, but you don't have that pressure of holding that emotion in any longer, so you're not afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a loss, or when you get angry, or you have a reason to have these emotions, you have it, it's proportional, it's in the moment, and you move on.
Yeah. You let it go like a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not attached.
Exactly. They're one moment they're crying, and the next moment they're laughing and they're having fun.
Yeah. Which is how it can be.
And should be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. Grief is something for me I've just grown to appreciate. So, you get older and then people start dying on you, and that's sad. So you have grief about it. But, for me, I lost my father a few years ago, and I've lost plenty of friends and other people and relatives and grandparents, etc. And, I really come to appreciate grief. Like it's not that I want to grieve,
Mm-hmm.
However, I recognize that grief is love. And if I'm grieving over my father, for instance, then it just shows how much I love my dad. And there may also be some semblance of like, I wish we had done this differently. For me, I feel pretty complete in our relationship, but there may be some of that, and that's okay too, because that's also part of the love. I would, even if it's, I wish I would have done something differently, and that's something I can still even communicate now, even though he's passed, because, I believe that he's still around, and also time and space are an illusion. So saith science. So, like there's something around that. Then also I can even have conversations with him about those things and whatever else. And a lot of times I hear him responding in the way that he would respond, and probably, usually for me anyway, from a wiser place than he was when he was with me. So I feel like that's something, people, that's another thing that people are, don't feel the permission for them to fully feel, don't cry at the funeral, don't cry about it, don't let it go. But it's so important to let it go in order to fully heal and integrate. And also, grief honors the person that you're grieving in such a big way, even if it's a relationship gone awry, or a friendship gone awry. It's still honoring the person that you had that with, and creating safe spaces to actually experience that is tremendously healing and good for us, allows us to evolve.
Yeah, and as you're sort of saying, if you really want to love, you're going to be willing to risk loss, which means you're going to feel grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we want to avoid the painful emotions, but often they're painful. Feeling or expressing their painful emotions is a setup to feel more of the joy of love, or the power of assertion, or the the wisdom that comes from fear, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, beautiful. Is there anything that you feel really important that you'd like to share about that we haven't talked about yet?
Before we started, we sort of talked about the couples thing.
Yeah.
And so, as you know quite well, I work with Dahlia, my partner, who's an EFT therapist, which is emotional focused therapist, which generally works with couples. And so we've been doing couples workshops and retreats for 10 years, and she's been doing it for 15. And I've learned a lot from her, from doing those and some other things I've done with or for couples. And I'm really seeing more than I would have expected how this approach that I've developed for men really works for couples. It needs to be tweaked some, but how the somatic part really allows couples to connect, to themselves with their partners in a safer, quicker way, and maybe more sustainable way. Certainly the attachment part that we talked about, which is what emotional focused therapy is based on. And then the communal part, and how, to use your tribe metaphor, we didn't just have our own experience. We just didn't have our own family or couple experience. We had all that within the relationship of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so those boundaries, if there were boundaries, were melding together. And we would think of it as being restrictive or dysfunctional, but in those environments is actually quite healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have this intrinsic need for couples to have a safe community where, like we're saying with these guys, they can realize that, we thought we were the only ones struggling or had this problem or that problem, and everyone else seems so perfect. And then you get in a safe place and people just become real. It's not like therapy. They're just talking.
Yeah.
Like they would in this tribe. And you start to realize that we're no worse or no better really than anyone else. Our thing might be unique to us, but we're all working on this. And when we can come together, we can actually help each other, often in an indirect way, or just being or co-creating a safe space so that, one couple can show up and be real and be seen in the entirety as a couple, not just as individuals, which we don't get.
Yeah.
We don't get. You might, maybe you get a little of that at a wedding or something, but we don't really have.
But that's when it's all happy.
Right. And it's just at the beginning. Right. And it's, it's a celebration. It's not, it's not
right.
real.
It's a blessing. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And having been in those kind of circles with you, there's something, doing couples retreats like that, particularly emotionally focused to couples retreats, then being able to witness all these other couples that are going through very, very, very similar, if not the same kind of issues. And, being able to witness each other, then it really does create a turning point where, it gives you like a ground to stand on. Like, okay, it's not just us that are dealing with these things, and identifying the different patterns that each couple has, and looking at like, okay, well, we're trying to blame each other and find the bad guy, or one of us is avoiding, one of us is attacking, or whatever it is, or we're both avoiding, or we're both quitting, looking at that, creating the argument and the thing that's coming between us as the enemy, and recognizing that really underneath all that is just some emotions that didn't get expressed, versus if I start off with, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now and under-resourced, which comes up for me quite often when I get triggered, being able to say that, oh, okay, what do you need? It becomes, what do you need, instead of, both of us going
Right.
at each other. And there's no question that there's something incredibly valuable about in particularly because, we as you say, as we've discussed, we're relying on our partner for kind of everything that we used to rely on with the tribe, as to Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, right? That's we're relying on so much everything from this other person versus like the community that we used to rely on. So then in that scenario, which we really can't, it's hard to escape that unless you really build community where it's like, okay, we're doing some ritual around that. It's so gratifying to see other couples kind of fighting the same battles. And then that creates its own sense of community. Oh, okay. And then the men get to meet together with the men, and the women get to meet together with the women, and then they talk about their things, and then they come and get it. Now you're modeling more of a tribal kind of situation, that's native to all of us. I mean, it's not, oh, well, you have to be Native American. No, man, we were all in tribes. Okay.
No, that's not cultural misappropriation.
Yeah.
Because
Not
every
even remotely.
ancient culture has had that, or if they're still at that level, have it.
Yeah.
And, again, each culture certainly did it differently. But, what that sort of feeds into what I've been sort of working on of late is that I think one of our problems is that we think our emotions are just personal.
Mm-hmm.
And my sense from doing all the things I've done is that emotions are relational. And so we're not meant to hold the emotions all ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's like this sort of third body ether that you and I, particularly if we're in a group or, we develop this relationship or whatever, and there's like that relationship sort of holds the gestalt of your emotion, my emotion. And when we start to not just understand it, but sort of relax into it, we don't have to do all our work on our own and by ourselves. And we surrender to sort of that collective between the two of us, but also I think it's applicable to a couple, and like as you said, into these tribes where it was innate with them that their relationship did not end at their hut.
Yeah, that's right. It was the village's relationship. Yeah.
Right.
Also.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if the couple in a village scenario, at least in the Dagara tradition, in the spirit of intimacy, if the couple's having a problem, well, the village has to fix the problem. It's not just their problem. The village has to go deal with it.
It benefits everyone in the village.
Yeah.
And like there's a phrase in family systems work that, you got the designated patient, which is like the child that's acting out. But that designated patient is usually the healthiest one because he or she is acting out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a community or whatever, when you look at it, you got a couple over there that's acting out. Yeah, they have their own problem, but what are they acting out in the collective that's not being expressed or worked on in a healthy way?
Yeah.
And when you start seeing it in a more systematic level and less personal, it decharges it and it engages the whole community.
Right. And which then prevents it from ossifying and concretizing into some terrible problem that can't get fixed. Which, this book is incredible also because they do all kinds of rituals where the couple will get together and they'll sit back to back and they'll just start yelling about the things that they're pissed off about. And they're not really listening to each other. They're just allowing themselves to express it in a way that's like given permission to get all that stuff out. And then it's like, okay, now the air's cleared. Not to say their relationships are perfect. I'm sure they have very similar problems, but that there are systems in place in order to release the tension that we don't have in place presently.
Well, it starts to move the energy. What happens is that energy gets stuck, and that's the real problem.
Yeah.
And we're afraid to move energy for all the obvious reasons, because we're afraid of emotions, basically. And, what happens when we move that energy, you take away the shame.
Yeah.
Because as you were saying, you sort of isolate that person, that couple. You're the problem. Oh, well, look at you. I mean, you're dysfunctional. And in this society, we have all these diagnoses that we throw at people, and so it's very shaming. So we have all these labels that we put on other people as why they're bad and wrong, and then we use those comparable labels as excuses for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which furthers this separation.
Yeah. It's hilarious. The games that we play in the effort to look good and be right about bullshit.
And also with that, to understand the problem.
Yeah.
And we think, and I use that word deliberately, if we understand a problem, we can solve it. Mm-hmm. And, that's probably true if you're writing code or building a bridge or whatever. But in terms of personal development, collective development, relationships, understanding it does not solve the problem.
Right.
It gets solved through experience.
Mm-hmm. And it gets solved through moving through the energy and expressing it. Yeah.
And like you said, with these couples back to back screaming to the community, it's sort of what I'm talking about with our anger ceremony. People need to be in a safe place to let this stuff vent.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the energy needs to move. I mean, we get emotionally constipated. And we don't realize it for a lot of reasons. One, because everyone else is.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And just because you ignore it doesn't make it go away. It just makes it worse. And then
it gets
get
imploded.
Cancer,
right.
Or whatever. We get some sort of disease that's related to the thing that we're unable to express, So here's to us fully expressing our emotions at all times.
Well, I don't think we have to do it all times, but we have to do it a certain percentage of the time. So
right.
I think, we can hold emotions for a while, particularly if a lot of the old stuff has been released, and we have a venue that we can, let go of it. Mm-hmm. So, and it might be, I got my group once a week, or, with Dahlia, my partner, I can, know that we're going to, every Sunday we're going to huddle and we're going to have a conversation. So, I can hold on to it for a few days because there's not a lot of backlog and because I know there's an opportunity to release it and express it.
Right. which is better. There's going to be a safe space.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to remember this when I go into the meeting, whatever that meeting looks like. Beautiful. Okay, how do people get in touch with you? How do they follow, the Jedi, Owen Marcus?
Well, the best way is through our business, which is MELD, M-E-L-D, .community, community spelled out. So we have a lot there, really dives into everything that we were talking about and much more. So there's free stuff. In terms of the paid stuff, we have different trainings. We have virtual trainings. We have a core training, which is an amazing 10-week introduction to this work. It started as a course I developed 10 years ago, and then it wasn't me, others have sort of developed it, refined it. They did a big study that was published in the APA journal a year ago. It was a couple-year study that shows the validity of this training. And
what's the APA journal?
American Psychological Association.
Oh, those guys. Yeah. They're probably smart.
Yeah. So it was like their premier journal. These two researchers studied it, and they studied the guys that did this one course. And so that back then the course was 4 weeks. It might have been 6 because we've changed it, but now it's 10 weeks. It's even more experiential. And the fellow that leads it, Mike, is amazing at it. He's honestly a better teacher at that than I would be. And for example, I put one of my clients in it. And after 2 weeks, maybe it was 3, he said, I can't believe how it's completely changed me. And his therapist that sent him to me wrote me an email and saying, this guy's 100% different.
Wow.
Because in couples therapy, he was losing it. And then this earlier today, she lost it. And he was just like,
wow. Amazing.
I was amazed too.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you can keep it together when she loses it, man, you got
you're the Jedi.
That's the Jedi.
So that's what we teach. And then we have what we call the Prime retreat, which is a 4-day retreat that I started many years ago because guys wanted to learn how to do this work. And you get like a 100+ page manual, and we just walk you through the MELD method. And it's really experiential. So it's a natural arc of change that we have when we change. This is something I observed over the years. So we just teach it one step at a time, and then we start compounding them. So what we do is we put you with 2 guys and you work on each other.
Okay.
You do a little teaching, a little demo, and then most of the time it's spent with you doing the work.
That's
so
great.
You leave changed, changing some other guy or guys. That's real empowering. And you leave with it embodied.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Which is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And then we have our advanced training, which is closer to year training, where we train professionals and lay people that really want to learn to do the work. And then I have a sort of high level, small group coaching program. It's 12 weeks. And we're developing other things, like an AI app that works with this technology and just helps guys. It's not therapy. It's just, all right, how do you connect to yourself? So when you start to get disconnected because of your partner or whatever, this brings you back. And from there, from when you are connected to yourself, you pretty much know what to do.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do when we lose our connection.
Right.
And so you could say a lot of what we do is getting guys back so they're connected.
Yeah.
And not feeling like they're alone, which also helps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what we have.
Amazing. That's amazing. Meld.community for everybody looking. And Owen Marcus, you can find him he's on the internet. He's got a TED Talk, all kinds of shit. It's good stuff. I really want to acknowledge you. It's interesting. I was thinking about this morning. We come into this life, and we think, and we're sort of trained by entertainment and society, like, oh, we're going to have some amazing adventures and, go to, I don't know, whatever, do, Jedi shit,
Mm-hmm.
like we're going to go save people from the Empire, And it's possible that maybe somehow your life looks like that in some weird way, but really, like, the work of consciously evolving as a human being is really about navigating our emotional landscape and really about, as far as I can tell, allowing ourselves to experience and feel the emotions that we can feel, so that then we can be connected to what it is that our true purpose is, so that then we can truly be of service to others and ourselves. And I really want to acknowledge that that's your life. That's what you do, is you train people to do that. Like, you really provide actual Jedi training for people to really navigate, what it is that we all naturally experience. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being a good influence on me and all those around you. You know, you're a good man.
Well, thank you, Geoff. That means a lot to me. And I feel like a very lucky man because every night I go to bed feeling lucky because I made a difference.
Yeah.
And I have for 50 years. And and it's been a really rewarding life that's not close to being done. But to do that. And that's my hidden agenda, is to do what you just said, to give other men that opportunity to have that for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I really saw pretty quickly in this work with started as men's groups, is to see how much men really enjoy being in the group, because just showing up as yourself, your authentic self, imperfect self, makes a difference for another guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do most guys have that in their life? They don't.
No, we're not allowed. Yeah. Yeah. It's really beautiful. So thanks for creating that space. I hope it goes global. Let's make it happen. I know there's some irons in the fire that could really boost it, and that'd be great. But also I'm all for just instituting this into, our general education system. So let's go.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah. If you want to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/lunacy podcast. Much love, everybody. We'll see you next time.